Hello, everyone. I'm JEAN-CLAUDE, Beyond Mystic, and welcome to today's show. This is the War Correspondent, and with me, of course, is the author of the Rebel Gene. You can find that here on Amazon. It's none other than KERRY CASSIDY. You can find her work, of course, on Projectcamelot Kerry, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to have you on because there's a lot of weird things going on in the last couple of weeks. I also wanted to tie in, as the poster suggests here, some of the predictive programming, perhaps in the Civil War movie that just came out. I also saw the Napoleon movie just recently, and I wanted to tie that in to everything that's happening in our realm now, and also talk about how it appears that we're switching gears in this war effort. There's a lot of things happening right now in the background, and I want to see if I can have your thoughts and maybe through this conversation help the audience better plot our moves here as we try to transverse and navigate all of these crazy times. Before we go into that, Gary, first of all, how are you? How are things been? And what are you working on there at Project Camelot?
Uh, what am I not working on? No, actually, I have been researching a bit. I'm not an expert ever on the financial situation, but I was caught by Juan's latest or one of his latest with John Chambers talking about a black swan event, which he also talked with Nino, but with John Chambers, he's talking about a financial black swan.
Mhm.
And I'd like to get into all of that. I did write this article that is Q is an AI, and I think that would be fun to talk about. And it's getting a lot of notice, I think, out there. And what else? So other than that, yeah, just actually very busy lately. Even though it seemed pretty quiet out, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I was also very interested that Alex Jones came out with some hitting some of the points of my recent article, which has to do with this supposed it's a slow solar flare slash EMP.
Mhm.
And I have a bunch of stuff behind that I'd like to talk about.
Okay, very good. I took a few notes here. Let's start very quickly. The Civil War movie. So let me bring up the poster for the audience members. And first of all, thank you everyone for joining us. We are triple casting on YouTube, Twitter, and also here on Rumble. So Kerry, let's try to. If you think we're gonna go a little bit rogue, let me know first, and I'll I'll remove the YouTube link just to be on the safe side. But I wanted to have your take on this. I know you haven't seen the movie. You've seen the trailer, and you've seen probably some of the decodes of it. The Civil War movie to me was interesting because although a lot of people didn't like it from the standpoint of the movie really not explaining itself, it didn't explain why things were the way they were. It didn't really explain who the different factions. We don't really know who's the good guy and the bad guy in all of this. We go back and forth throughout the movie, so it was frustrating to some viewers. But I think that was the whole point of the movie. It was for us to understand that once we get into this critical time, it's going to be very difficult for us even to discern who's the good guy and the bad guy. And we kind of see that playing out now in the last number of years in this spiritual war that we're in. But specifically as it pertains to what 107 was saying about this gut punch or this a black swan event in the financial system, there are hints in the movie here of the Civil War as to what led to it. At one point, the people in the media here trying to make their way to Washington D.C. Opposite forces, they're trying to buy gasoline at a station, and they're being told that. They're not going to accept the US dollar and they would prefer Canadian dollars. So I thought that was kind of funny. But that's a hint there that something has happened at the economic level that caused or maybe exacerbated the situation in the United States. So let's talk about that a little bit. If you want, for the audience members here, share some of that, what Juan was saying, what some other truthers have been saying in the last week, that it appears that we're moving into a period of time now where they want to pull the economy, the plug on the economy. There was an atrocious interview on CNN where they were actually giving him the truth about the economic numbers just earlier this week. So something's up here and something's around the corner. What's your take on the economic situation and how that might lead here to the next couple of months being kind of weird?
Right. Well, there's a few things, and I just had a big discussion with a friend of mine, and we basically agreed on all these different points. But what I was very struck, okay, first of all, I've written this article that Q is an AI, and I'm explaining in detail my reaction to a very detailed conversation between Nino Rodriguez and Juan recently on his show. That was all about, he was in Japan and he was comparing where we are in America. And I found that extremely concerning, that someone would try to draw parallels to our time and be pointing at that when, you know, obviously that's a cautionary tale. You know, I don't know why Nino didn't like, but he doesn't act the kind of questions that I ask. So all I'm saying is that you can't just come out and say we're like, you know, Hiroshima, when that hasn't happened yet. And that's an insane thing to say to people about our country, or at least that we're going to quote unquote lose some cities. Like, those are casual comments that should draw a great deal of reaction. I don't know why I'm the only person in the world.
Further questioning, yes.
Reaction to these comments. And then recently, even more recently, he came out and talked to John Chambers, who's this very sort of sobering kind of individual. It seems like he has a military background, but I don't know. He's well known, I think, or he's fairly well known in the movement, so to speak, but behind the scenes, very not been on the camera all that much, in my view. So, you know, he used to do American Media Periscope with James Grundvig and the whole team. And then they all abandoned ship when it was sold to this other network, which call letters escape me at the moment. So there was something going on there. And I tried to dig into that. I was supposed to have a conversation with John Chambers. Never happened. No fault of mine, no fault of his necessarily, but there was some interference with that happening. So the reason I bring these up is because they're, you know, everything's connected. So now we have Juan. He was in Japan for this other one, supposedly with John Chambers. And he was also, this time he was talking about the Black Swan event in financial terms. And he was targeting and saying that it was going to emerge out of Japan because of something Japan is doing. Now, that really piqued my interest because I went into a whole search. I started talking to my financial sources, and I wanted to know, what is Japan doing that is so concerning that it's going to cause us to have, in the United States, to have a huge financial debacle. It's going to be like the beginning. And he said, we're already in it. It's already started, and that it's going to trigger a lot of other, I guess, dominoes, if you will. And then on top of that, he started using the term solar flare interchangeably with EMP. And I have a whole theory on that, which I've written some articles on, and I really like to talk about that. But to get back to the financial thing, and I don't even know if I'm answering your question properly, but the bottom line here is that what my sources and what my information is starting to say, and by the way, Benjamin Fulford, who lives in Japan, he's arguably controlled by the triad, for those who don't know. I interviewed him in person years and years ago, maybe one of the first, maybe one of the only in Japan. So we flew to Japan to interview him all those years ago. And that tells a lot about his background and what happened to him and so on and so forth. If you're interested, it's still on my website and on probably on my Odyssey show, channel, and maybe Rumble. But anyway, so what I'm saying here is that suddenly Benjamin Fulford changed gears. He was going along fairly with the program, with what you might call the narrative, the official narrative that we're all listening to and hearing and stuff. And all of a sudden said Trump wasn't going to win the presidency, but McLaughlin, that general, was going to be the president. Now, how out of left field is that? Right. So, and that was just last week or just a few days ago. At the same time, you have to say, why is Juan in Japan? What Juan does, and this is, I don't think it's a secret. I think people would probably put two and two together. He's actually kind of like Trump's right hand, and he goes out and does a lot of negotiating with world leaders while he's traveling to these places ostensibly, for whatever reason. We never hear the real reason, right? So his conversations, I think he was there quite a while. And my information is telling me that he was in negotiation with the people behind the scenes who really run Japan. And what they're saying is that Japan is going rogue in terms of the narrative. They are no longer, in theory, going with the program of backing Trump and team and the story here in the United States and really around the world. And that right-left kind of split dichotomy. Instead, they're going their own path. They're starting up their own military. So what I'm thinking is that why, you're a financial guy, you might be paying attention to this, but they are, they're sort of not playing with the team anymore. It doesn't look like. And I think that would be a major concern. So I think that that's why Juan went there. I don't know. Of course, we don't know the content of the negotiations or even who with, although my source said there are 5, I don't know if they're called shoguns or what, but they are these, I forget. I don't know what to call them, but they're 5. I don't know if they're sumo wrestlers or what, but they run behind the scenes. They run Japan. This is according to my source. Okay. I think he gave me another term. Anyway, so I think it's worth looking at this, right? Because we've got financial pundits that always come out and say a black swan, but they don't tell you why, where it's coming from, And I want to understand if we're going to, if our dollar goes, well, one, on the other hand, he says some weird things about the dollar. He says, first of all, the dollar will survive. But I get the idea that the dollar will then be backed by gold and it's going to be a little bit different kind of a currency. He calls it a constitutional dollar or something like that. Right. And then the regular dollar, I don't know, disappears. But whether your dollar is going to be the same as the constitutional dollar, you know what I'm saying? That sort of trade, is it going to be worth the same amount? That's
you're probably going to have a haircut. A lot of analysts are already suggesting that when this transfer is over, you're not going to get a 1-for-1.
Okay.
Let me add on this Japan thing for a second. We could talk about China also, but in the context of what you've just brought up, it's funny you say that, them leaving the narrative in a sense, because I've seen 3 things that are of interest to me. One, they seem to be backing out and encouraging people to back out of the WHO treaty. So that's, again, moving away from the narrative. Right. I saw some lawsuits and some new legislation, I believe a week or 2 ago, where Japan is now banning. So again, they're kind of walking away from the narrative there and suggesting the reality is very different than what we're told. But in terms of the economy, this is where we get into the nebulous currency wars. So the BOJ, the Bank of Japan, has been intervening very severely in the last number of weeks. And we're seeing that on the graphs right now where something is up or there's a change. Where that goes and where that leads, I think a lot of analysts are kind of scratching their heads, but it does seem to lend to the fact that they're rogue somehow and they're not necessarily playing games. I'm going to have Jim Wheely on the show. I'll ask him about this. This is tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. So guys, if you want to have more on that, just join us tomorrow on this Rumble show. But going back to the rates, Hiroshima might have been a result as to what they were doing. I would flip it the other way to say that perhaps after Hiroshima and the deals that were made after that would have made Japan a vassal state, basically beholden to the United States. And a lot of analysts suggest that their pension funds have been usurped somehow to support the dollar and all of these schemes over the last... Right. I mean, but that's what I mean. At this point, it appears that they are no longer playing that game. And if they pull the rug underneath the carpet of this huge illusion, that will create more stress and more, I guess, shock moments to the dollar. And just last week, to add to all of this, the IMF now, the International Monetary Fund, put out a notice to warn people that we're close to the death of the dollar. So I'm like, this is not Kerry Cassidy and JC and the Till4 Hatter saying it. It was the IMF last week. So all of that suggests, Janine, that yes, we appear to be close to something a big change in the financial world, and all of these players now are starting to pull the blankets on their side, so to speak, and they're not playing the big game here for some reason. So what Juan was
Right. But
negotiating
there's
there,
a
I don't know.
couple other extenuating circumstances that I need to hit on. So there's also, it came out in the news today that Biden is going to put an extra tariff on any incoming, I think it was from Japan, right? Yeah.
Electric cars also.
Yeah, the electric car thing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. Also, my source said there's a battery that they have for the electric cars that makes them go for twice as long. And you know, the Japanese are very good with taking something that's already invented and making it much, much better at a lower price. That's kind of what they learned. Okay, so there's I'm going to say this because I know it's going to be a little off topic, but I think it's important behind the scenes. So behind the scenes, there is something going on between the reptilians who are a part of the Anunnaki, who are actually reptilian humanoid hybrids, as I call them, and that are trying to run our world. And the beings from Mu, that the Japanese are actually a race of hybrids from that a certain, and it may be the dolphin people, or I'm not sure what their exact designation is, but that is part of what goes on. And that's why there's an animosity also between China and Japan, the Chinese not being dolphins, and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to say here is that we have a scalar weapon, directed energy weapon, slash, EMP, or solar flare. And this is the latest. So I believe I've done some research on this and articles about this, and I've been actually waiting for this, which is this demonstration we had this past week where we had these beautiful skies. And the bottom line being, they're saying it's because of solar flares. And what people maybe don't realize is that we have had, of course, solar flares forever, but they haven't been directed directly at us because the ETs, we are told, certain friendly ETs have directed the beams away from Earth. So they have protected us. Right. Now, there is reason, I believe, I had looked into that, and I believed that the deep state secret space program has been working on getting that technology. They don't want any technology the ETs have, they want to have. Mm-hmm. So they obviously saw the advantage of having control over that technology. So I believe that they have figured out how to redirect solar flares towards or away from us themselves. And I believe that this latest was a demonstration. It was a precursor to what they're going to do. And I also believe that they're using the idea of an EMP as a kind of a cover story, because EMPs are, first of all, I always think it's Janet Reno. Someone else said it wasn't her. It was another person leaving the, whatever you call that, organization that she was head of. Anyway, and you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. So she said before she left in a press conference, this particular person, who might not be Janet Reno, it might be this other one whose name I forget, saying it's not if we're going to have an EMP, it's when. Yeah. And this goes back, by the way, to, I've been doing this for close to 20 years now. And in the early days, our whistleblower, it actually was Henry Deacon, told us a whole litany of things that would happen. He said, they're all going to happen at once. It's a plan. We're going to go to war with China. That's a plan. They're all agreeing to it. And then they're going to have an EMP on America, but it's going to be created by America and blamed on whatever country they decide to blame it on. I don't think he told us who would blame it. Maybe China, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. So that's why I have special attention on all of this, and made it, my background for my recent article that Q is an AI, which it is. And there's so much evidence that Q is an AI, and that the white hats are using an AI, and the dark side are using an AI. Now, I've even heard this thing where they go, oh, well, we're using AI, but it's carbon based. But, spare me. Uh-huh. I mean, they'll go to all links to basically, whatever. you want to call that. So what I'm saying here is that this is important. So we get 2 interviews with Juan, more or less back to back in a short time period while he's in Japan. One is telling us that we're going to be under attack. Now, there's this other thing that happened by a serendipity or not so much, because I must be directed. And I think I've always had protection and direction. So behind the scenes, and I think it's probably ET, but I'm sure I get helped by white hats and various people that are undercover. So all of a sudden, I decided to interview Brooks Agnew, who I'd seen at a conference recently that we both spoke. And I thought I'd bring him on the show. So it turns out that he's in the midst of writing a book. He now claims that his prior book, this is the sequel, which turned out to be quite accurate, predicting what was happening around the time of the Clinton administration, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that his subsequent one, the one he's almost done with and will publish in July, that he's getting his information from Looking Glass when it goes online, he calls it, and that he thinks he taps into it, psychically, and just knows for some reason, having connection to it, and that it is predicting this. It's predicting, in essence, an EMP/solar flare, pick your poison, the way it comes, right? But the effect, the important thing between the solar flare and the EMP is that the effect on the Earth is similar. Okay. In other words, it takes out all the electronics and stuff like that, either temporarily or could be for years. But in theory, of course, according to Brooks, it's only going to be for, I think he said, a few hours. I interviewed him. So all of this, you can watch the show and see. But my point is, back to back with my article about Juan, talking about what's going to, the attack on our country, came Brooks Agnew talking about tapping into Looking Glass and admitting that's an AI. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And basically coming to the same conclusion that we're going to have some kind of EMP/solar flare, that there's going to be simultaneously right after that, that's going to blind us or blind our technology. And then we will be vulnerable, and he just said, use the word offshore. So offshore, we are going to be under attack, is what I got. That, again, it might be targeting certain cities. So It turns out that these 2 men, who I don't even know if they know each other, they know about each other probably, but they're saying the same thing, but they're coming from completely different angles. Okay. As you can appreciate.
I spoke to Penny Kelly yesterday. I was doing a show about sky events. So there's 2 things on the radar also. There's a family of seers or prophetic dreamers in the Haida Gwaii here in Western Canada, who've just recently dreamt about a sky event having to do with the moon cracking up and pieces falling down to Earth, where there's military involved to avoid some of the potential damage to our infrastructure, but also apparently in a race to try to avoid the realization that the pieces that are falling down might not be from an organic moon. So that raises the question of what is the moon, what's behind it, who's on it, all that stuff. So there's that. And then Penny Kelly, this last week, and also 6 months ago, in one of her look-sees, talked about this sky event where because of a specific event, the government would be forced to implement some type of lockdown from something coming from the sky. And so she just picked this up again last week in the last look-see. I'll have her next week on to go into more details. But she sent me the detail yesterday. I thought, that's also interesting. So just to add to the conversation.
Well, there's also the Future Forecasting Group of remote viewers led by Dick Algier, who several months ago, I think around December, and I think even Cliff High, his bot is saying the same thing. They were all coming up with this. Either it was a solar flare type event or it was a EMP. And they were all the viewers were getting this information. So we've got a collision, of similar type impressions and stories coming along.
Yep.
And then Richard Allen Miller, who I interviewed, he was the first one actually to predict something, but it was supposed to be April of 2024. Well, we're in May of 2024. So maybe he was slightly off, or maybe it's just not even going to happen until October. But this, by the way, this event and everything about it is going to stall the election. So that's one of the main things that's involved here, besides attacking us, taking us down in various ways, so and so.
Yeah.
On top of it now, we've got Juan having this discussion about Japan and the Black Swan event that's financial, which is also about to happen. So we're going to get attacked from all these different angles. But I think it's important to realize that these are not natural events that we're talking about. It's going to look natural. They're going to tell you it's natural, which is this dress rehearsal we just had last week.
Right.
But it's not actually going to be orchestrated, in my opinion.
Well, that's what I was getting at. Because when Penny said, "Oh, an event happens and the governments have to force a lockdown," I'm like, "Whoa, wait. Does the government do the event in order to be able to force a lockdown to, again, maybe manipulate the election, or bigger overarching values of the economy? The whole planet is in this change now." Part of her, let me just read part of what she gave me last night. I did share this on the Insider Access Pass show. She says, "I've had also some serious concerns that they are too complicated to send through text messages, but involve people unwilling to wait for the elections. They are too angry. Maybe Trump and the White Hats or the team in their plan may have miscalculated how far people could be pushed." And so she's showing a scenario where people may go rogue, some weird things. And she's talking about a rogue element of sorts. Not sure who in this scenario. So that was also part of that last look-see. She says difficult to look at, but nonetheless, we have to pay attention because, it's, as you say, it's coming up from all of these different sources. To add to that too, what was interesting to me in the last couple of days, people reporting seeing these basically northern lights in the southern hemisphere. So again, suggesting that there might be a new technology at play, redirecting some of this, creating these light shows in different spots around the world where we haven't seen them before. Again, not proving that the Space Force has the technology, but something seems to have changed. And it appears that these cover stories are just that, cover stories for something else that's happening behind the scenes. So I'm with you on that. And last but not least, so we've had all the remote viewers, we've had the people who are looking at non-local information talk about these EMPs, but that phrase you just mentioned, not a question of if, but when, was also repeated just 2 months ago when Dennis Quaid was put on Tucker Carlson. That was the whole reason for this 1-hour interview as to how perhaps the government isn't prepared enough. They're not talking to people how to be prepared for EMP. And they were drumming up this conversation to bring it to public awareness, and then to think about what we can do individually, but what countries should be doing also in the event that this happens, how we could be seen as weak in the current state of the world, but also, yes, the war front as well. When 107 says that, and you talked about he's negotiating when he goes on these trips, I want to just backtrack here and ask you, in the context of all of this now, in your view, who the hell was he negotiating with in Antarctica, Kerry? He certainly wasn't going down there to talk to the penguins. So how does, if you can share, or if you have,
well, I did go down that road a little bit. I think on your show, I'm not sure how much we covered at that point, but I've also written articles about it. So the bottom line, according to, I had these sources, and the one source was actually a remote viewer who came out of the blue and contacted me to tell me what he'd seen when he remote viewed Juan in Antarctica. And what he saw was a conference table. He was the most graphic. And then I got some follow-up confirmations of this. Okay. And then Juan, through a source, I know this information, he actually went before a certain group that are considered a trusted group of white hat type people, and told them that, I think the number was 1,000 people from around the globe. It wasn't just Juan going to Antarctica, all went down for the same meeting. But the conference room meeting that was described, it certainly didn't have 1,000 people at it. It had, whatever it is. And it had the light side, what I would call the light side and the dark side. And then there was sort of a monitor, you could call it a TV monitor or some kind of box in the middle of the room that through a voice came up from a voice and said, addressed the crowd, and basically, I call it gave them their marching orders. But the bottom line is that it also was linked with, and I've got a whole article about this, because Richard Allen Miller then came forward off the record, but on the record. In other words, it's okay. He works for Navy intelligence, so they must have released it was all right to say this. But so there was an event in December linked up with Beetle Jews that had to do with a passing, what do you call it? Either a comet or a asteroid, I think. And that interfered. It came in between the Earth and Beetle Jews, so that there was a period of interference that was not that long. It was around December, I think 14th, if I remember, something like that. And you can look it up. And it's a real event that happened. Now, what happened was actually in connection with this voice that is addressing, this was actually like 2 or 3 months later, February, I think it was, this meeting. And I think it might have been the reason for the meeting is because there was some changing of the guard, some interference with the AI from Beetle Jews that had been beaming our planet and possibly in control of our planet and Mars, by the way, and that there was some change and that it may have reverted to Mars, and Beetlejuice is now out of the picture as far as the AI influence on our planet. However, then there was also the manifestation of a Nephilim who kind of rose out of the ground or whatever, three-dimensionally kind of, but or interdimensionally, before the crowd, before the people. And so there was that portion of it as well. So it was a very interesting event, very interesting rumors or information from sources about it, remote viewers, etc. But I think it was significant. I don't think we've gotten to the bottom of it, obviously. But since you're asking, I'm just going down that road. But I do have.
Let me drill down a little bit. So just to confirm, you and I had not gone in that much detail at the time when we first reported on it. So I appreciate this first salvo of information, and the audience is going like, "Wow, okay, that's fascinating." Now
you can go to my Substack, by the way, to get these articles, and there's a lot.
Let me bring the Substack first of all for the AI. Do you want to play a game here back into the live chat for the audience members? And then from there, you guys can, of course, click on the main Substack for Project Camelot and see the rest of the articles there. So going back to this voice at this meeting, there was another session where the folks at the Future Forecasting Group did something on the moon. Time that Clefai and I put out the video Sci-Fi World Lunacy, and we were talking about the theories about the moon, who was on there, the control structures, how that related to Indigo Squall, what he had seen back in the day. And Dick Allgaier, in his particular session, had suggested that there was indeed this control system. There was a communication system that was a relay from Jupiter, and that on Jupiter there was another entity forecasting that information to the moon and then to the Earth. And he got a glimpse of it during that remote viewing. And so I'm curious now, when you say this apparition, you said Nephilim, or this voice that was in this conference room in Antarctica. Did you have any indication as to where that voice was coming from? Inner solar system, outside the solar system, or perhaps Jupiter?
Well, it was outside. It was outside the Earth. I mean, it was off planet, I believe. There was no indication of where the voice was coming from. I'd be much more likely to think it was Saturn rather than Jupiter, to tell you the truth. If
I apologize, I meant Saturn. I said Jupiter. I meant Saturn. Saturn,
because Saturn is notorious, and even among ETs, it's notorious that, it's been said among ETs, also according to various sources of mine, that they won't have a meeting, like a general, like UN type meeting, like they do intergalactic, without Saturn being there. So Saturn, it factors in a very big way. It is a portal also into the other galaxies or something. It's some kind of jump gate type thing.
I think it's
So
just as similar in that same of technology as the sun might have been. And in fact, in our
that's
history,
right.
we used to look at Saturn as our main sun. Now, going back to the moon, also just to correct myself, yes, it wasn't Jupiter. The moon being the replicator station or the duplication station of the information coming from Saturn. The repeater station is the word.
Well, okay, John Lear used to talk about that. He people kind of thought he was crazy back in the day, but he would talk about, in essence, the moon directing souls that are supposedly doing what, and then going into a tunnel, seeing the white light, and then actually being sent back to Earth. In reincarnation, what we're talking about here. So they're, but I don't think they're not in. He always painted it as the moon, and that the tower on the moon is in control. I don't think it's in control. I think it's just it's what,
A repeater station, or there might be
it's a mechanical or whatever you want to call it,
yeah.
technology. It's a tool that they use. It's not the control.
I
So
agree with
and
that.
that gets into a whole spiritual thing, which, is off topic completely. But, we could talk at some point about.
Sure. I want to bring this up also because I just rebooted this movie Decode franchise this year. We were doing some of these last year.
I'll be right back. I have to let my dog out. I'm
No
sorry.
problem.
Go
And for the first inaugural show, I decided to decode the Truman Show, and I thought that was very fascinating, given we all feel like we live in the Truman Show. We have all of this electronic surveillance, and to some extent, all of us humans are the true man in this particular show, where we are waking up to the fact that we have controllers. And I thought that was really cool. And I'll wait for Kerry to come back on. And in the meantime, guys, at the end of the show here today, so please stay tuned. We are going to be giving away for the audience members here this Ascension Organites pyramid. This is the Samantha version. A beautiful pyramid here too. So stay tuned. Pay attention to everything we're saying here in the show. Where we're going to be asking you a question, and hopefully one of you guys in the live chat now will be one of the lucky winners. In the meantime, if you're looking at getting some of these really cool pyramids in your own possession, you could do so here at ascensionorganites.com, where there you'll see also brand new, just launched a couple of days ago, the Haida Gwaii inspired silver jewelry collection. These are all handmade. Beautiful pieces there as well. They're going away really fast. We only have a few of those. So if you're interested in that, maybe check out the Sunday night special Mother's Day show to get some details, and also peruse the remaining collection here on ascensionorganites.com. So let's go back to this show, Kerry here, the movie Decode. What was interesting about that is that Christos, the name of the overseer of the Truman Show, his office is located on the moon. So they're giving you the visuals there in the Truman Show that somehow Truman is being controlled, or at least oversought by something on the moon, the control station being on the moon. So you see all the technology there in his office. And at the end of the show here too, what's interesting is that because Truman is waking up, because the true man is waking up to the set, to the movie, to all of this, and he's creating all of this havoc because he's outside of his predictable loops, so to speak, at some point to try to regain control over him, God, or Christoph here, has to make himself known, and he speaks from the sky to Truman, trying to convince him at the end to not exit the stage there when he finds that wall across the waters. I think that's currently what we're looking at now, Kerry. And I want to ask you about that voice again in that conference in Antarctica. What's the state of affairs there also? When you said they were being given these marching orders.
And the reptilians are arguably also, I forgot to say that there's also in the feedback and information we got, there was an Enki, like an Enki link up to this first from Beetle Jews and then from Mars. So that the switch over to Mars would be, if you follow the Enki Enlil story, would in theory could be Marduk, because Marduk is in charge of Mars. So there may be some things like that. And for all we know, the voice could have been Marduk. Okay. So I think that people, it's kind of like we're trying to describe this elephant, and we all have pieces, and there's some overview kind of information, but you don't know which is more dominant. I can say, if you're talking about the moon, you're talking about, according to William Tompkins and all my interviews with him, is the reptilians dominating the moon and thinking it's their territory. Right. So there's that aspect as well. And I think what's happened since that time is that there's a clear delineation on the moon as to what territories belong to our secret space program and Earth or whatever, and the reptilians who still are in charge of probably a large swath of it. And, you know, one of the people, Randy Kramer, was actually based on the moon for a while. He was also very much based on Mars. So just saying, if you want to look for source material on this, he's a good source for who's running the moon right now. But they're definitely still interfering with spacecraft. So any craft that goes near the moon has, you know, faulty things and all this kind of stuff. And the same with any probes that go over towards Mars, you know. So there's a notorious, it's bad. Both of those planets are battlegrounds with T's. But the Anunnaki connection is also in this Antarctica situation, as it is with Israel. So think about it, if what we're really talking about is an Anunnaki running the planet, and this gets back to, I know that maybe some people will not like this, but I have talked about it for years, okay, which is the link up between the Anunnaki and Israel, okay, and that the Anunnaki are based basically in Israel. That's their headquarters, as far as I'm concerned, and the information that I've gotten over the years. So, so that factors in to this scenario in which Japan is rebelling against the Anunnaki. Now, what's the fallout? And what are Trump and Juan and their white hats? Is their relationship with the Anunnaki who are running Israel? And let me tell you that they are basically, in many ways, trying to run the planet. Now, if you go against what they want, that's when you get blowback, right? So Juan comes back from Japan and is giving this interview, or on the way back, and he's basically kind of laying this financial debacle, in a sense, at the feet of Japan, instead of saying, you know, it's a worldwide thing, or emphasizing that. It's all how you put the narrative, right?
Right.
So what that indicates, you know, if you have not noticed, Juan and Trump are extremely careful about the Jewish lobby, okay, and the power of the Jewish lobby, and that factors in with the election issue and so on and so forth. So I'm not saying they're in the cahoots with the Anunnaki, but I think that they have to deal with the places they find it, right? So we're fighting wars to take back our planet. And one of those groups is the Anunnaki, for sure. And there's so much data about this. And, you know, I had this whistleblower, Major Solomon Berg, who talked about the Anunnaki and how the Yeti, which is called a Squatch, who didn't want to stay underground in Israel with the U.S. military group, because they are age-old enemies, apparently, with the Anunnaki. And there was a whole story that it went into. Then there was a whole blowback on that guy, pretending to say that either he really did come out and basically say it was all a lie, which is not true. You know, he works in the secret space program, anything's possible, and so forth. So I know that I might be going on in sort of circles here for people, but if you don't focus on who is running our monetary system and understand that it is controlled off planet, this has been over and over again, the information I have, and that includes the families that run it for them. Okay, so the Anunnaki are the kingmakers. They choose who's king, right? And this has been going back to the times of Egypt, and you know, probably before that in Sumer. And we're talking about humans that get, in essence, anointed by the Anunnaki to run their business, which is the families in Basel, Switzerland.
Yeah, they're given the divine right to rule. Now, let's go back. I appreciate all of this. For me, it ties in, and you're I really appreciate this conversation. So too are the audience members. Let's go back to Beetle Jews for a moment here. So, interestingly enough, you said that maybe something had occurred in December. You talked about this
It's
asteroid,
an
or
asteroid. It was in the news. It's mainstream.
yeah. The point I bring that up was that the Haida viewers were also suggesting that whatever is about to happen, that we are going to be treated to visually, maybe even as a replay, did in fact happen in December. So I thought that was interesting. They were talking about the moon, but if the moon is a repeater station also, now you're suggesting, or through this meeting and through some of the rumors, that perhaps a connection was lost from Beetle Jews to Earth, or a strength of that connection, or the control from that AI system. I thought that was interesting in the context of this eclipse that we were having, and why CERN was booting up again on this last solar eclipse that we had. Have you heard anything about CERN at that point? Why they were doing that? Were they perhaps trying to, now in the context of this conversation, reestablish that connection for some reason with Beetle Jews?
Well, that's an interesting theory. Now, I did have a lot of information, and again, it's on my Substack, where I'm talking about Antarctica, and I'm talking about the testimony from behind the scenes of Richard Allen Miller. And he actually, I mean, he never does this, but he gave me a lot of information leading down the road of explaining what CERN was doing from his point of view. And I can say that I know that Captain Mark Richards has said multiple times that one of the jobs of CERN is to keep the portal wormhole open between the Draco galaxy and Earth, so that the reptilians who have these huge ships can come in front of the statue of Shiva at CERN.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I had a remarkable sighting, just a side issue, in France, on the borders of Lake Geneva, in a little tiny town. I don't remember the name of it. This is many, many years ago. And there's even a little video of me. I'm like, I was kind of half asleep, but I was with Bill Ryan at the time, was my first partner in Camelot, right? For only about 2.5 years, but this was during that time. So the very early Camelot days. And I was in this little French town. We were staying in this little tiny, sharing a room in a storefront with a family who were staying upstairs, and we were downstairs, and they had tons of kittens. But anyway, and Bill had gone to this meeting, of the part of the reason we didn't stay in contact, Scientology type meeting.
Okay.
And he came back at, late at night. It was maybe 11 or 12 at night. And I had been woken for some reason. I just came out, and I just had this urge to walk out. And in France, as you know, and it was summertime, people were walking the streets. Okay. And there were cobblestone streets, and there were people everywhere. And I just felt like looking up, and I looked up, and I saw this huge craft. It was triangular, pie shaped, not like triangle type triangle, but pie-shaped triangle. And I had the sense that it had both reptilians and humans in it. Since then, I had reported it, and it's on a video, by the way. And then at the same time, a whole bunch of people in the Geneva area also came up with saying that was a very common sighting in that area. Just saying.
Mm-hmm. That's similar, those pie craft shape, to what William Tompkins was suggesting was on the crater of the moon there, when NASA made a visit there and we're told not to go back. I think that's fascinating. So you're not talking about a TR-3B here. That's cool. And on that trip to France, was that the one where, did I get this right? At some point, somebody was messing with your brakes on your rental car. Was that on that same trip? Okay. You say that so nonchalant. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But, we were protected because we got to the top of what's Grundewald. It's a windy cliffside, going way up high in the Swiss Alps. And we just pulled into a parking lot. I think we had a meeting there or something we were going to do. Mm-hmm. And the entire wheel, not just the tire, but the wheel fell off the car. Just and then we brought it to a garage, and they said it was a clean cut. So had it happened on the way up, obviously, I don't even know if I'd be here, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Crazy times. Let's go back to your article. I wanted to maybe come back to this here too. Interestingly enough, when the Q phenomena started, making public comments and on these boards, and people like the hysteria about decoding all of this stuff, people were suggesting that Q at that time was similar to maybe the poet or the court jester during the old days, when they would have to explain to the mass population what the king wanted to achieve in a specific war type scenario. So he was kind of like the middleman between the organizing forces and the mass population to try to wake them up. So in one hand, it's a big psyop, you could call it that, but it was to awake the population. And then it went dark, and that's where a lot of people are asking questions now of, if we are going to change gears in this spiritual war we find ourselves in, and it very much looks like we're in that phase now, changing gears in a big way for many different factors, not just the economic system. Have you, looking at this as from the angle of the AI, is there a strategy for it to go dark? And is there a timing, or perhaps even whistleblowers suggesting that it might come back online sooner rather than later? What's your take on why it's dark right now, and whether or not it could come back online here in a big way?
Well, it has come forward several times sporadically over the last, but very sparsely, in the last year or two. And there's a certain board that they only post on, and it has done that. Now that it's made a big deal every time they have said anything lately, but you could even see, in a certain sense, that when Q came out first to lay the groundwork for Juan to come out and talk and be the spokesperson. Okay, so I think, and I also think there's a very close relationship between Juan and Q and the AI as well. So, and I know that Pascal Nejadi, who I'm trying to interview, might happen if our connection works next week. He is also making a big thing about John F. Kennedy still being alive and being Q. He made a huge thing with that on Alex's show.
Right.
But the thing is that, again, if you look at the evidence, and I actually show a piece of evidence, which is this date, which was, I think, May 10th, 2024, on May 10th on 2018, Q said there will be a sky event. That is, in essence, the looking glass type of technology. So this is why Q is not completely exactly accurate all the time, because it's a matter of probabilities. And this is where Juan, who gets his information from Q and the generals, is not always accurate either. Mm-hmm. So that's where the timeline is shifting constantly, and there is arguably interference, and so. Now, I have an article that's very important, at least to me, on my it's on my Substack. I put it there, and it's called The Aetheric Influence Over AI, and it's based on the Radu Sinamar book, Etheric Crystal, and I have a picture of the crystal that I think is from the cover of the book, but I'm not sure. But anyway, and I quote from there. Now, when I read that book and I was reading about this influence, because it goes into a great deal of depth, I highly recommend it. Okay, the book, because one of the scientists, that were basically blacks, what we call black scientists in the secret space program of Romania, who are hand in hand with the U.S. military, and they're also involved with the Romanian Sphinx, and that there's an installation from the Anunnaki with these huge tables in this cave under the Romanian Sphinx. I'm assuming you know this story, but I've talked about it on many interviews. And I went into that story in a huge way, to such an extent that when I do my Awake and Aware conferences in England every year, and I'm going to be doing it again this year, it looks like it's going to be the 31st of August and the 1st of September. So it's going to be right there, assuming we don't have some, cataclysmic interference event.
Right.
Then what happens is Romanians come to my conference in person. So it's kind of a funny thing. But anyway, just saying that what we're talking about here is that AI can be influenced. And I do a jumping off point from there because I had this intuition that that was the case, but no one talked about it. And I believe that communication, by its very nature, it doesn't matter who the being is, whether it's AI or a carbon-based life form, whatever it is, we communicate. Okay, that's the nature of God, that all that is, the creator, that all it is a constant communication with God. Like I had a friend who said, I communicate with God. And I said, well, everyone does.
Right.
We do. That's what our life is. It's communication with God, in essence, if you think about it. So there is no non-communication with God. People that think that they're, you put a block up and God doesn't know, or whatever it is, this is nonsense. The reality is that just like life is eternal, communication is eternal. So
and in that commercial, I just want to add to that.
Goes both ways. Go ahead.
I just want to add to that here too, because just announced now the Vatican, the Holy See, they're preparing to release a document giving guidance on how to discern supernatural phenomena. This is coming out on May 17, presumably because they know something's about to happen. You just mentioned May 18 being a big event. Apparently, somebody's trying to tell us.
Well, that was on the Q boards as when they predicted that May 10th event here, that it's already happened, which is the solar flares.
What do you think the Vatican is up to with this particular release here? Are they trying to front run something and they're trying to...
I haven't seen it. I will have to look at it. Okay. So, if you want to tell me briefly, what does it say?
It's basically putting out a procedure for humans to discern paranormal
like we phenomena. Need their help because they're run by the reptilians to tell you how to think and how to look.
Of course, because having a conversation with God is dangerous. Remember that Pope who said that we needed to go through the church, of course, to have this.
Oh yeah, of course.
Crazy times.
Yeah.
Did we go through everything? We're already at the hour mark. Kerry, there was something else at the beginning of the show. Maybe I took notes on what you want to talk about. Am I missing something?
I'm not sure because there is a lot. Now, if you want to go in a different direction as well. So Q the AI is my article. The reason I actually, maybe let me explain, is that what I'm trying to do is make people understand that because Q is an AI and the white hats follow an AI, that the AI could actually be misleading them. That's why etheric influence on AI matters. Because if the white hats follow an AI and the dark hats follow an AI, and though that AI and those AIs are controlled by a higher level AI, however, or they could even be merged and be one. In other words, we're really talking about what are the decision-making points that the white hats use to guide their modus operandi. And when Juan is doing certain things and saying certain things are going to happen and so on and so forth, it's with an intention. There's an intention in mind, okay? And this is a game, and we're talking about Japan being on the team or not on the team, and that Japan's financial system is going to crash, and that then correspondingly our financial system is going to crash, and maybe the world's, and all this kind of thing, and how that's going to change our lives, and and what are we really talking about? Are we really talking? See, because the white hats, they have a plan, right? Follow the plan. And the plan is also including, they have to destroy the old system before they can launch the new one. Now, I would submit that this is something they've been told to do by the AI, but I find it suspicious, because you don't have to destroy the old to create the new, okay? That sounds to me like an Illuminati overlay. That is presuming you must have destruction in order to have creation, and that's not true. So in essence, we could create the new Shiva.
Right.
Okay.
No, I'm with you on that. The way you just said it, at first I wasn't sure where you're going. I see what you're saying, but you also have to leave the possibility. For example, when you're renovating a house, sometimes you have to take it down in order to build it back up. It's just so old and so cracked that building on top of an old foundation just doesn't make any sense, right? So it could
Sure.
be some of that too with the financial system
Yes, absolutely.
and all the tie-ins that we don't know about, all the over-the-counter derivatives that we don't know about, all of these unintended consequences.
Yes, except that let me address one thing is that are we really this is another thing and I think ahead. I don't know why I'm always a future thinker.
Yeah.
So the thing is that I wonder, are we really getting rid of the system when in a sense, Trump and the whole system of the White Hats has been resting upon a lot of presumptions and a lot of assumptions that they have taken on board. And that this is a point that's very important. All of my top level financial sources right now who are Illuminati, you could call them defectors, you could call them defectors with permission, like Leo Zagami, who is like that. Basically, they're all saying Trump is going to win it. In essence, they have already acquiesced behind the scenes to Trump is the winner. And this is across the board. And I just talked to another source who's telling me things that I'm not at liberty to release about this. But the bottom line is not only is Trump president and CIC now, but that he's already won the election, where they just get the vote from the people. Well, the vote of the people is already for Trump. And the Illuminati know this, and the Illuminati have agreed to it. So we have a very unusual situation happening here on Earth right now, because the bad guys are agreeing with the good guys.
Yeah.
And letting Trump take over, because in a sense, it's a fait accompli. It's done. So why do we have to have these shows, that are for the benefit of the people, blah, blah, blah? Because there are 20% that are still blind. But the reality is behind the scenes, and they'll even tell you when they tell you what's on the blockchain and then all the evidence of the vote, that it's 80-20.
Yeah.
And it was then too.
Yeah.
And that I'm just suggesting that on top of the show, that with the Anunnaki and my very top level financial people all agreeing that Trump is the next president, that why do we go through this game of pretending, oh, let's have him run and let's go to court and try to, tag him and slow him down and all this kind of thing. In other words, he doesn't have to play the role anymore.
Right.
Of the underdog, because he's actually already won. Now, I know that will be controversial and a lot of people won't, maybe not like it, but some people are really going to get it. Yep. And the fact of the matter is, think about that. Okay, let's be smart. The thing that I hate about a lot of things that go on is that they pretend people don't know. They pretend you don't know things. Okay. And so they conduct business as if you are stupider than you are, that you know less than you know. And so we're constantly playing this sort of game of catch up where humans have to prove to their, overseers or whatever, that they actually do know, that they do get it. And so let's move on, because we can't move on until we all agree to move on. Right. And as long as we think that we have to, they have to show us, that just pisses me off to no end. So, but
Kerry, I'm with you. And not only am I pissed off, I get enraged with all this. I had Andy Scheckman on the other day too. He's banging at the tables. God damn it. It doesn't make any sense. Like, enough of this bullshit. I'm like, I know. There's the bird flu and now there's the camel flu, believe it or not.
And it's not going to come off the ground. It's not going to go off the ground. Okay.
No way.
But these people are going to act like idiots. And of course they're going to be allowed to act like idiots. And we're going to pretend. I mean, it's kind of like the stock market. If you watch financial news, I'm sure you do, nonstop, you will see that they never talk about the real truth of a financial system. Okay. They never talk about the naked short selling. I have a friend who's an absolute expert in that and bringing a case against it. And I have to tell you that the bottom line is that who benefits from the naked short selling is the banks, who are making incredible amounts of money behind the scenes. I'm being educated on about this. I'm not an expert. I don't know anything about it, but I am saying enough with this with humanity. Let's stop pretending that the truth is not the truth. It's not so much that the truth isn't out there, it's that people spend their days and their entire lives pretending it's not.
Is that part of the free will aspect of things? Does this movie need to play on for people to have the
Whose
free will
will,
to
though?
decide?
So I'm saying, I guess, in many ways, I feel like I'm the voice of the people, the
Yeah.
conscience of the people, whatever you want to call that. And I don't think the people like it this way. I think, those of us, which is now in the majority. Okay. Maybe it wasn't in the majority.
There's people who feel comfortable in wearing their masks still today, Kerry.
Yeah.
Like, you certainly don't speak for them. I don't speak for them, but they have that comfort
No,
in
but
knowing that they're safe and protected because they
I
took
know, but take away the training wheels, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's about time for humanity. Just to close on this, so this was the CNN interview here. I won't play the clip. I played it many times this week, but they're basically CNN, as you're saying, even the bad guys were telling the truth here this week, telling Biden that his economic record was absolutely horrible, and that in the next couple of months before the election, he doesn't have time to turn it around. So it kind of feels like they already decided that he's not the winner. They're ganging up on him, so to speak, on the economic front based on the narrative we just heard.
Actually, they want to get rid of him. So this is actually orchestrated because there's still going to be some last gasp attempts to throw someone out on the public that you can have some kind of election around something. At this point, there's no point in having an election. No matter whether it's stopped or not. Whether, I don't know if it's Newsom. I mean, Newsom. I'm in California. We consider Newsom a super Nazi. Okay, so there's no argument there.
Yeah,
but I don't know who they want to pretend it could actually run against Trump, even at this late date.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always a game.
Yeah.
There are games within games,
It's a game within a game within a game, and so on. Speaking of this, the last point here, I wanted to bring it up because you kind of alluded to it here with respect to Trump being the winner, the fact that we're changing over the economic system, that it's all part of the stage here for the next couple of months. Just this week, all of these big banks here in Canada also have all admitted here into some of their SEC filings that they are in fact invested in Bitcoin ETF. So there appears that the banking level now has capitulated to crypto, but what crypto? So here they're talking about, if I bring this one up here, Visa, MasterCard, JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, other big banks are testing ledger technology for tokenized asset settlements. Here, in my view, this was Bloomberg News. They're suggesting they're moving the CBDC way, so the central bank issued digital currency. And that was interesting, again, setting the stage for this. Perhaps this is the answer to our question, Kerry, this war that's coming up, because at the same time as they were doing that, Trump came out and said, hey, I'm okay with Bitcoin, accepting Bitcoin for campaign donations. That was the first salvo. And then he kind of said, well, I don't want to put away Bitcoin innovation. So if you want digital assets here in this country, you better vote for me, unlike what Biden and Gensler are trying to do, right? So he's kind of setting the stage towards the decentralized crypto. In my view, in my opinion, this seems to be what's at play. And we're saying here that perhaps this is the first election in the United States where we are going to be talking about a crypto in a very big way. So this perhaps is the answer to our question, why all this game? There has to be a big education here so that we don't fall into the CBDC, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, Babylonian money magic, but rather into another system that could be, and I dare hope here, more fair for humanity, which is the route of the decentralization and disintermediation here, removing some of the middlemen and all of this. What's your take on what Trump is doing, the White Hats here, with this war that we're about to face between the centralized and the decentralized crypto?
Okay, that's not completely clear. I know that Juan, he talks about this, and he's grudgingly, supposedly Jennifer, who he supposedly is married to. I'm sorry. I think these games are being played still in that regard, but let's say it's real, and that she had some crypto, so he has some crypto because of marriage, right? He said that on a show. Yeah. So I'm just saying that he is also, back in the day, remember I interviewed Paladin a lot. He was a white hat.
Yep.
And we talked a
Financial
lot
crime
about
stuff, like he was really.
QFS and the quantum financial system that was being built by the White Hats that technically is already operational, even if you listen to Charlie Ward, if you like. So in a sense, they are running it behind the scenes. I don't know how much behind the scenes is operational. I don't know that kind of stuff, but I can say that I believe it's online in some form or fashion. Of course, they don't seem to be promoting it in any big way. Now, I think part of the reason Trump is winning is there is a sort of a negotiation going on where, let's make a deal is happening. So he's made a deal. I don't know. We don't know what the deal is, but I think there's going to be some agreements here that are going to be reflected in what rolls out. Okay. So with regard to back in the day, Paladin seemed to think that cryptos wouldn't survive. Then there seems the thinking changed since then. And now they think that they will, that Bitcoin will survive, the changeover kind of thing I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So there's also, okay, this is so convoluted because you're saying a non-centralized system, but in a crazy way, because it's run by AI and maybe on blockchain on some level, which blockchain never forgets kind of thing. Right. So we're talking about being a tracking system, in a sense, coming from the White Hats, in a sense, being even better at tracking you than the one from the Black Hats. Mm-hmm. This is actually, it's worth delving into. I mean, I wrote a book.
I'm with you on that.
I read a book and wrote an article. I called it Tracer Checkmate, I think it's called, and it's on my Substack. And I'm reading this book about sort of how they learned to track Bitcoin and how the dark, how a nefarious people were trying to use Bitcoin to hide stuff and do all kind of things, right? All that. Mm-hmm. So it's operational. I mean, it's still operational, but they did learn to track it, and it's totally trackable. And I say this in my article. In fact, I get into a whole discussion about how I believe there was a kind of an interesting trade-off on the White Hat side having to do with the blockchain evidence of the vote and why they never came forward to really tell the people. Right. They had a couple of spokespeople, Robert David Steele back in the day said they have it all. Hayes has said it. I mean, there have been a few people that have touched on it. Yeah. I was paying attention. It made a big deal for me. Sidney Powell had the information, but what happened is they didn't succeed in the courts, supposedly, on what's called standing, which I think should be outed as a bunch of bullshit that it is, because Americans, if they don't have standing in a court to do with, their vote, then what the hell are we talking about here? It's all, I don't know why lawyers continue on with this facade, but nonetheless.
Even to the normies out there who say, oh, Trump lost in court about the election. No. There's no standing. They didn't even hear the cases. They didn't want to hear the cases.
But it's complete and utter bullshit, and somebody should really attack it and take it to court. Okay. Yeah. But it has to be a good court, not a compromised court. Yeah. So what I'm saying here is that I wrote this article about what they traded, and read my article. It's called Tracer Checkmate, because it's based on this book that analyzes exactly how they learned to trace, the nefarious dealers on Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And they've got it all down. It's all understood and known, but they never told people because they never wanted people. Okay, think about it. If blockchain is operational, and that was under the NSA, and this was actually announced. Okay, it was done, quietly. A lot of people missed it. I didn't miss it. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is that I think they pulled back on that because of the issue having to do with if they had they traced the vote, and they have that. It's documented that they can trace Bitcoin as well.
Yeah.
And they can't catch any more bad guys if they know they're being traced and how they're being traced, in theory. So it was about keeping it semi-quiet so the technology wouldn't quite be known, so they could catch a lot more bad guys. And that's what the white hats kind of do. They will let something negative go forward in order to catch more flies to honey.
Do you think that's what Mike Johnson is doing? Is he letting stuff go through these new bills that are absolutely outrageous from a conservative point of view?
This is the game. It is a game that infuriates me. Okay. Yeah. But, it's what the white hats do. This is what Trump does. He's a deal maker. Well, being a deal maker is it's good in a sense, especially if you either make a deal or you have war.
Yeah.
And this idea of going even into underground bases and rescuing all the children, where Mark Richards actually said in Dulce, they rescued the people and 2 weeks later, the Greys went and got them again. Yeah. You've got to understand on a deeper level how evil works, why it works, how light and dark work together, yin and yang, etc. And get, grow up a little. And in order to join the galactic community, we're going to have this in spades.
Yeah. And that's probably also part of the answer you're talking about. As much as we're frustrated, this show keeps going on for that purpose alone, maybe to eventually educate people to the reality of this world, as long as that may take, so that we can join our spacefaring brothers. Kerry, we're already an hour and a half into it. Fascinating show. A lot of people are saying, wow, we love the show today, guys. Thank you so much. I have a pyramid to give away. Kerry, let me bring that back up. So we have, 1,500 or 1,600 here on YouTube and about 4,600 watching on Rumble. Great audience today. Thank you for that super chat, by the way. Really appreciate that. The pyramid we're giving away today is Samantha. This is an organized pyramid here from Carla at ascensionorganized.com.
Lovely.
Yeah, gorgeous pyramid there. Do you have perhaps relating to the show today, just a simple question with a one-word answer you can ask the audience? We can scan the live chat here for the first one who answers your question. Do you have a question in mind, Kerry?
Well, let's see. I'm not good with this kind of stuff.
It could be a character. So you've named a bunch of characters who you were talking about. So just say, who was so-and-so that I was talking about this and that with? That could be as simple as that. Okay.
Okay. Well, okay, let me talk about this. Okay. Who is the first person we interviewed about Looking Glass?
Oh, okay.
That's only people that know my stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm at the bottom of the chat here. I'm looking. Usually takes a few seconds to populate. It wasn't William Tompkins. No. It wasn't 107. No. It wasn't Pete Peterson. No. Henry Deacon. Was that the one?
No.
No? It wasn't Henry?
No.
Okay. It's not Mark Richards either.
No.
Okay.
And I don't know why people just don't remember this.
In my is it Dan Burish?
Yes.
No, he did talk about that, but was he the first one?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're there. Hold on. I think we have a winner here. Let me just circle this one. Free and fighting. I think you're the first one who has the answer. Let me just scroll up, make sure I didn't make a mistake.
Dan Burish, and it's the interview. Actually, it's called Project Looking Glass. You can look it up on my website.
Wait. I'm trying to remember that interview. What was the other one where he was talking about helping an ET escape?
Well, that's part of it.
Is that that same interview?
Yeah.
There was like the 3-part interview.
Well, it might be the same.
Yeah.
We did several with him,
Yeah. That takes me back. What year was this, Kerry? Do you remember?
Oh God. Actually, I don't know. We'll have to look it up. It might be 2007.
I was gonna say 2008, kind of maybe. Okay, yeah, that's cool. Okay, so free and fighting 3069. You're the winner of this beautiful pyramid here from Carla.
Yeah, 2007. How's that for a memory?
Yeah, very good, Kerry.
Yeah.
Guys, so if you just won this pyramid, go to beyondmystic.net. At the top of the page here, you have the About section. Just fill in the tech support form. Let us know you're the winner of today's pyramid, and we'll have Carla send that out to you. If you're looking to get some of these in your own possession, of course, go to ascensionorganites.com, and there also you'll find the new Haida Gwaii inspired silver jewelry collection we just posted the other day. More than half of it is already gone, guys. It's going really small, very fast. We have a small collection here. They're all handmade, so please do go check that out. And if you're looking for the pyramids, of course, if you use the coupon code Beyond Mystic in one word, you'll get 10% off. Kerry, before we go, how can we support you, and what's coming up here on projectcamelotportal.com? Any new inspiring interviews or new articles on your Substack that you want us to keep track of?
Well, first of all, I'm going to be speaking, if all things go as planned, in June, June 8th and 9th at the Mel Carmine. It's some kind of what do you call that? Whatever his tech, that software, you know what I'm saying?
No.
Oh, you don't? Come on. It's a technology, whatever you call that. It's like, it's not, I'm sorry, I'm terrible at this. But anyway, I'm at a conference being held near Cape Canaveral in Florida.
The XRP conference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Now.
Okay, XRP. So,
I thought you meant like a TED talk. There's something with an X. I was like, what's she talking about?
Yeah, no, it's and Wano Savin's speaking there supposedly. Okay. There are a bunch of other people as well. Okay. And they have a website. It's I don't have it in front of me, but anyway, and I've actually posted it on my Telegram a few times, so it's on there, the details and stuff, and you can buy tickets, I believe. So anyway, I will be there
that one?
In person, June 8th and 9th, and so that's one thing. But the other thing is that, there's just a tremendous amount of stuff on my website. And does seem to be working now pretty well. I will want to say that, yes, we are subscription based, but most of my interviews that I do are free for months before they go behind what we call the paywall or whatever you want to call it. And even if you do subscribe, it's ridiculously cheap. It's like $3 a month. For a year is the cheapest one. And if you want to do month to month, you can go $5 a month. So it couldn't be cheaper, but it does help pay the bills, keep me afloat, and allow me to sometimes pay a webmaster, but it's been an uphill battle in that regard. Yeah. Because we have technical issues with our website a lot, but right now it's fine. And just want to say that there's just a tremendous amount of stuff we're doing. I am trying to get an interview with Pascal. I'd love to interview Roseanne Barr. I'm being blocked from talking to a lot of these people, certain people that try to run things behind the scenes, try to block me from interacting with people because I asked the really good direct questions and nobody wants to hear it, at least on the two sides. So anyway, just saying.
I talked to Juan, I think it was November or December. And we came up, I think this was a phone call, and we came up on the idea of me interviewing Roseanne Barr. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm all for it. I'll see if I can hook it up for you. And then I never heard back. So I don't know, maybe cooler heads prevailed and figured, oh, shit, maybe we should have put these two together. But I'd love to have her on the show anytime, of course.
Yeah.
Somebody in the chat. Oh, yeah, it would be cool. Somebody in the chat says, hey, KERRY CASSIDY and Penny Kelly show together would be interesting. I have Penny Kelly coming back next week, but would you be interested in doing?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to do an interview.
I mean, I think we've been on shows together maybe a long time ago, and I did ask her for an interview. I don't even know what happened to that.
Yeah. Okay.
It's hard to say, but
I think actually you and Penny were on the same show, on my show, maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah.
Okay, well, it'll be fun to put the team back together, so to speak, and talk about the situation with the ET. She has a lot of
be fun.
information of how
Happy
this
to
is
do
kind
it.
of unfolding on the galactic view here. So that'd be cool. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching us here today. Please do go and support Kerry, of course, at projectcamelotportal.com. I do recommend the membership there too, especially for the old videos, as we were just discussing now. A lot of those things that Kerry did 5, 10, 20 years ago now are just coming to reality and to the forefront now too. So they're absolutely just as
Huge.
prescient
It's
today
huge.
as they were 15, 20 years ago. And that's where you'll find the whole library. So, and of course, it helps Kerry continue to do the amazing work that she's doing. So Project Camelot at portal.com. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Of course, this was the War Correspondent for May 14. Thank you. Have a great day, folks, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.